This is the Living Unconventionally podcast, your home for digital nomad, expats, and all those adventure seekers who want to discover the wonders of this beautiful planet. My name is Chris Piak, I'm your host, and with me today is Amy Scott, the host of Nomad Utopia Radio. Hello, Amy.
Hello there, how are you?
Thank you very much. I'm really good. And I'm very glad because I have you back on the show. In last Monday, we talked a little bit about your adventures traveling the world. We talked about how you fell in love with Argentina and with Argentinians in particular. And today we talk a little bit about how you make all those travels work from the point of finances. And that's, as I understand, is now especially important for you because you are about to start a family.
Yes, that's right. That will definitely be impacting things a bit.
Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
You and your husband, you have been traveling for quite a long time now, for 12 years on and off. Tell us a little bit about the different things that you tried in order to generate an income during your travels.
Right. Well, first of all, I started out just saving money to be able to quit my job and do a round the world trip. So that was the first phase. And I wasn't really looking at ways to make money while traveling at that point. My focus was I'm just going to take a long trip and focus completely on the travel. So I had saved money first to do that. And then after that, as that trip was coming to an end, I didn't want to go back to an office. And I knew that there were ways to be able to make money from anywhere. And so that's basically what I set myself up to do. So that was in 2005. And my background was in book publishing. I'd worked with lots of freelance editors, copy editors, and proofreaders, and basically contacted everyone I knew in publishing and said, okay, I am now freelancing. Please hire me. And I remember I had decided August 1st was my first day of work, and I got my first project on that day. That has been my main source of income ever since. Freelance editing, primarily nonfiction books, has been my bread and butter for almost 14 years.
Did you experience any negative effects from the fact that you are not located in one place anymore?
There were a couple things I had to take into consideration. One was that at the time, a lot of proofreading was still done on paper. So when I first started freelancing, I stayed in the States for, almost 2 years to kind of save money back up and also just to kind of confirm that, okay, this is working and I can make money to support myself doing this. So while I was in the US, I would sometimes have a paper manuscript FedEx to me, and I would mark it up and then send it back. So then once I moved to Argentina in 2007, that obviously was going to become less feasible. The time and the money involved in doing that just didn't make sense for anybody. So I had to say that I wasn't doing proofreading anymore, or at least not on paper. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. I remember being nervous about telling people that I was not in the US. And so for a while, I actually really kept that information to myself. I only brought it up if for some reason, basically if I was asked outright, like, where are you located? I wasn't going to lie, but I was nervous about people being like, oh, never mind that I'm not going to work with you. And over time, I got more relaxed about that and was more open about it, and really never had problems with that. Every once in a while, even now, there will be somebody who, they just really want to work with someone locally, like somebody that they can meet at a coffee shop and, talk about their book. Then I'm obviously just not going to be the right editor for them. But 99% of the time, it really doesn't matter where I'm located, and that's never been an issue.
Yeah, I remember when I moved away from Germany in 2001, moved to Estonia. I had exactly the same fears. Because I was at the time, I was a journalist writing for major news outlets and also for major corporations like Microsoft, Lycos, Yahoo, and so on, and T-Online here in Germany. And I also worried, how will they perceive me if I'm abroad?
Yeah.
So when I created my company in Estonia, I had 4 people working for me. If I'm honest, mainly for the reason that I felt like, okay, I have to represent something, which is really funny in it itself, because, when you work for T-Online, who has 120,000 employees, to think that with 4 employees, you can make any kind of impression is really grandiose thinking. I experienced never any problems from working abroad. Nobody actually ever cared.
Yeah.
That's good. And nowadays with modern technology, it's so much easier.
Yes, absolutely. Things are much easier now than they were then.
Yeah. But I noticed in the experience that you shared, 2 things that I believe might be very good advice for people who start out in this lifestyle. Number 1, you started doing something that you already knew and where you knew you could earn a salary with or income with. And the second one, it seems to me you relied heavily on the connections you made.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those were both big factors in my deciding to go that route. From day one, I had plenty of other ideas about ways that I might be able to make money, but I knew I could email, 20 people and have editing work like tomorrow, basically, and I knew that would it was the most clear and certain path to make money quickly and consistently for me with the skills and the connections that I had. So it was really a no-brainer for me to start there. And yeah, I still tell people that now, that if you have skills that can easily translate into freelancing or starting your own company and being able to use the skills and the contacts that you already have, I think that's by far the easiest way to go.
Mm-hmm. Did you develop relationships on purpose once you decided, okay, I want to go? Or did you know, okay, I already have so many established relationships that it doesn't really matter. I will always be safe.
Yeah, that's a good question. You mean like once I started freelancing, did I work on developing those connections?
No, once you decided that you want to move abroad, before you actually quit your job.
No, not really. Because it was probably in the back of my head that, okay, when I get back, I could do this freelance if I wanted to. But I really wasn't looking beyond the trip. I was focused on, okay, this is how much money I want to have saved. This is when I think I can quit my job and start the trip. And I really wasn't too worried at that point about what was going to happen after. And so, I wasn't really doing anything intentional at that point to set things up for future work. But then when it came to that point, just having worked in the industry for a number of years, I had the connections that I was able to network with without really, putting in any extra effort in.
Yeah, that's something I experienced also throughout my life, that it really pays off to be a good person and to be reliable.
Yeah.
Because you can always make a quick buck and burn bridges behind you. But if you're consistent in what you're doing and people know they can rely on you, then it's so much easier to gain their trust when you start to do something new.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will work with you, even when it's something you haven't done before, because they know you and they trust you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And also, this wasn't strategic necessarily, but just, kind of how I operate. I left on very good terms with my last employer. So, when I contacted them 10 months later and said, hey, do you want to hire me for freelance work? They weren't like, forget it, Amy. Like, we don't want to talk to you ever again. They were happy to hear from me because I'd always done good work for them. And, we had kind of a respectful parting. And so, right, like you said, I hadn't burned any bridges there.
Mm-hmm. So that was basically your safety valve that you could always fall back to. But you also tried a lot of different things. Can you give us the highlights, like 3 or 5 things that you tried, and the one that worked out best for you, and the one that was like, oh my God, never do this?
Yeah, gosh, I've tried so many things. So I think the main thing that, I still do a lot of editing, but over time I started to think about like, okay, if I'm not at my desk editing, then I'm not making any money. And, is this how I want to spend my days? And, what else am I good at? And what else can I help people with? And so I was starting to explore, what other possibilities there might be. And out of that exploration came Nomadtopia, which I started in 2011. And then both through Nomadtopia and also actually on the editing side, I've tried a bunch of different things like running different programs and things like that. I did a program for writers to help them finish their books. I did a program for editors, actually, or aspiring editors who wanted to get into the field. I ran a program called Create Your Nomadtopia a number of times as like a live 6-week program. Got my coaching certification so I could start, again, on both sides. I've worked with people as a writing coach and I've worked with people as kind of like a lifestyle coach through Nomadtopia. Started the podcast. Yeah, wow, it's a lot. Yeah. I put out an ebook.
Let's start with the failures first because they are more fun.
Sure.
What was one thing where you, looking back, say, okay, that wasn't the smartest move, or that didn't really work out? And then we move from there to the things that you would recommend.
Yeah. So I think probably I'd say one thing for me that I guess you could call a failure is that numerous times I tried to find and hire subcontractors for editing. So people who, could also be doing editing work if I didn't have the capacity and, kind of build a bit of a company around it, so to speak, instead of just me doing all the work. And, I gave it a go several times over, like years apart. And I just never found people that I was really happy with and that, who met my standards and that I felt confident that I could hand off work to them. So I basically, after giving that a couple tries, I basically decided, okay, either I'm going to do the work myself or I'm just going to maybe give them someone names, so they can go find another editor. But I didn't want to be responsible for people working under me, and kind of being like guaranteeing their work and all of that. I thought I'm just going to do it myself. I don't want to create like an editing company. So that was something that took some time to come to that decision, but I feel good about that.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a market opportunity because I know exactly what you're talking about. I often experience the same situation that you want to outsource some work, but it's really hard to find someone who you can trust. Because in the end, it's your reputation that suffers if something is not delivered on time or if quality is not up to the standard that you promised and so on. People who deliver that kind of quality and who are reliable, they can earn, as we say in Germany, they can earn themselves a golden nose. So if you are listening to this and you are wondering what you would have to offer that would allow you to make a living, reliability. That's something that's really highly valued by employers and by anyone who wants to buy a service.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
So let's move on to the things that really surprised you because they worked out so very well.
Yeah. So the first thing is that I started my podcast, Nomadtopia Radio, in 2014. And I actually don't remember why exactly. I mean, I don't remember a particular strategy or plan around it. I had been doing some written interviews on my website. And I think that part of it was, just knowing that people wanted to hear from more people and more experiences than just mine. But I didn't really have a strategy for how I was going to make money with it or how long it was going to last or anything like that. Over the years, I've definitely gone through periods of I don't know, is this worth it? Should I keep doing this? But then what happened is I started another offering, which is a paid online community called the Nomadtopia Collective, which has been going for about 1.5 years now. And without really expecting this or trying to make this happen, I was finding that almost everybody who was showing up in the collective had found out about it through the podcast. Mm-hmm. And so then finally it was the pieces, it started to click, right? And I was like, oh, okay. So the podcast is the marketing for the collective. And, I feel like that sounds so obvious now when I say it. Again, that wasn't a strategy I had going in, but that has been working well. And it's great because it's also given me kind of renewed motivation to keep going with the podcast when I sometimes feel like, oh, what's the point? I'm putting all this work into this for what? But it is getting out the word about the collective and bringing in new members. And I have basically put everything else on hold, like all of my online programs for Nomadtopia that I ran in the past, I'm not offering anymore. Some of that content is available through the collective, but I basically have really streamlined things. And now I'm focusing 100% on the collective with, of course, the podcast as kind of the free resource and also kind of the marketing engine for that. So it's felt really good to focus in and just do one thing, instead of trying lots of different things and, like, well, let's try this and see if this works, because I've done plenty of that.
Mm-hmm. I understand. And what did you find out about the people who join your collective? What are they looking for and what do they get out? If I'm interested to join the collective, what would I get? And what did you learn? What is it that the people want? Mm-hmm. What makes them decide, okay, I join?
Yeah. A lot of times it's people who are in kind of the early stages of creating this lifestyle for themselves. They might have, we don't focus so much, it's not, for like, okay, what business should I start? It's not like a business building kind of thing specifically. So most people who come in already have the money piece figured out in one way or another. Either they're building a business or maybe they're on a path to early retirement or a sabbatical or some variation on that. But then they also maybe have a deadline or a plan for, okay, this whole thing, our adventure starts in October or whatever, and they're getting freaked out. They're feeling like there's a lot to figure out and, their friends and family don't really get it. And they recognize that being able to connect with other people who have done it, who are doing it, who also want to do it, can just be really valuable, and to learn from other people's experiences and have a place to ask questions and share the wins and the challenges along the way. That's what a lot of people are looking for when they come in.
Mm-hmm. Would you share some of the feedback you get from people who joined the Nomadtopia collective? Like the nicest thing you got as a feedback?
Yeah, I think, part of it too is that I also have a free Facebook group, which I've had since 2012. So it's been around a lot longer so far. And I was worried at first that it would be confusing to people, or they would think like, well, why should I join the collective if you have a free Facebook group? But one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten from people is that the collective feels, compared to a Facebook group, feels like a much safer space and feels like a place where people are looking for deeper connections and having more meaningful conversations. That it's really just a wealth of resources and a place where they feel like there's really a sense of community that they might not be finding, for example, in a free Facebook group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate because people are more committed once they decided to put some money on the table.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Great. So to wrap this up, for anybody who is interested to start traveling the world, living abroad, becoming an expat, becoming a digital nomad, one place where they can go is, of course, to join the Nomadtopia collective, which they can find where, Amy?
That's at nomadtopia.com/collective.
Great. Besides joining your collective, what is the number one advice you want to give anybody thinking about starting this lifestyle?
Yeah, it's always so hard to narrow it down to one. There's so many. Well, and in fact, we've talked about quite a few of them already, so that's good. I think maybe the one thing that I think is important that we haven't talked about too much is taking some time to get really clear on what you want this lifestyle to look like for you and why you want that. I think that there's, especially with social media, there's a lot of kind of stereotypes and glamour, around what this lifestyle looks like. people working on their laptops on the beach and all of these things, that if you stop and sit down and think about it, you might realize I'm not really a beach person or, I hate taking my laptop to the beach or, so to be more realistic about it and to think about what kind of environment do you want to be in? How do you want to spend your days? Do you want to be in, a big city or do you want to be somewhere more rural? Are you trying to avoid winter or do you actually, want to spend all winter skiing? There's no limit really. And to be able to identify what's important to you and then look for both kind of the mode of travel or living and also the location that will give you those things, I think is kind of the best route to success.
Great advice from Amy Scott, host of Utopia Radio. Check her podcast out. If you haven't done so, subscribe to her podcast. And if you haven't done so, subscribe to my podcast as well. This is the Living Unconventionally podcast, and I'm your host, Chris Piak. And next Monday, we talk again to a world traveler who chases her passion around the world. Thank you for listening.